there folks who are benefiting when a country like Kenya is not doing so well in particular areas?
Of course.
Okay.
Well, okay, so crisis economy. So maybe just let me start there and say that, yes, we have, or well, rather, we don't just have crisis economy. We also have another one, which is redistributional economy. What happens when disaster happens is that, resources move quickly, and these resources moves in billions. And it kind of like creates a justification to move resources from development, for example, to response. And in that kind of situation, there are people, of course, who benefit. Political and budget actors, find justification to move resources from things that were planned for before to something else. And this something else, of course, in the sense that of crisis, is that I'll call it a black box for citizens, because they don't know how that money is used. And they are not involved in the movement of that money. And then eventually, of course, participation is also very limited in that sense. So the political actors, the budget actors also benefit from that. The second kind of actors are also, market, movers. When emergency happens, procurement systems are changed from open procurement in development. If you move money from development, it would have gone through open procurement systems. But now, because it's emergency, you put, you hold on to, you hold your open procurement to kind of apply what is called direct procurement, for example. Then prices also go up, and the suppliers benefit from that. And so there are probably people who would like that crisis to continue, so that then the business opportunities also happen. And then the last kind of actors, of course, are external actors. So in the case of county governments, for example, national government come in to support, but also humanitarian actors. So we're talking about NGOs and other people who bring money to the economy. And part of the reason that happens is that because our systems break down. And of course, there are other reasons why humanitarian actors also come into play and benefit from that.
Wow. Dustin, humanitarian aid, relief aid, emergency response is all meant to be a good thing, because it is meant to come in and create an intervention or you have a disaster, mitigate against loss of life, mostly, and also maybe move people to where life can be more sustainable. So when resources are rapidly moved, it is a good thing, because it means we can have action in time, and we can have minimal losses, if at all. But that seems not to be the case, because we have a long history, especially in our country, Kenya, or in Africa, large, and also in other like Middle East countries, where you have long-going humanitarian aid provision. But you don't see the impact of that aid. It is short-lived. Of course, the impact is seen from the beneficiaries or the benefactors, but the people who are supposed to receive this aid or intervention or support, rarely do we see actual sustainable impact. How would you, in your own assessment, rate that impact analysis?
That's an excellent question, and this is a lot of what we cover in our report, Governing Inequality, Kenya's State, Aid Politics and Perpetual Humanitarian Crisis. And there is this kind of tension between this need and urgent, pressing need to save lives, which is invaluable, and that is critical. But again, this kind of focus on the short-term dynamics without addressing what are the underlying causes and drivers of people to be vulnerable in the first place. So if we look at Kenya as the focus of our study, but this happens in many other countries, in Kenya you have 200 to 400 million US dollars coming in every year to kind of alleviate this human suffering, save lives. But there's no real effort to kind of address why are people vulnerable in the first place. And across the arid and semi-arid lands, which make up, a huge part of Kenya, a lot of those populations living in those areas suffer from lack of investment, lack of infrastructure, access to water, access to jobs, access to social services. And so when a crisis strikes, whether it's drought, whether it's flood, and this happens all the time in Kenya, then they are kind of hit and extremely vulnerable, and then the international system steps in, and it's kind of this rinse and repeat every single year without going, okay, how do we actually invest in these communities to make sure they are resilient in the first place? And this has been going on for years and years, and there are a lot of vested interests in the way this aid economy has been established. So we need to kind of go beyond the short-term thinking, which is really more around looking at structural inequalities and also like governance issues in Kenya and elsewhere.
Okay.